Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Ask Andrew show. And on it, we're going to be talking about parent coordination. Our special guest today is Susan Cook. She's built a practice in parenting coordination, and she also does family law mediation and divorce coaching. Susan and I will discuss the role of parenting coordinator in family law matters. And welcome to the show, Susan.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Andrew.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you today. And I wanted to start off, you became a parenting coordinator. What was your background in terms of educational skills and training to become a parenting coordinator?
Well, years ago, I went back to school to study social work, got a job doing mental health assessments in criminal court for the Mental Health and Justice Program. From there, I had a client who was in both criminal court and family court and started helping her in family court. And things seemed to go a lot smoother with the assistance. And one of the judges there requested that I work with others. So I suggested a program to the agency I was working for and implemented the family court worker. From there, I started learning about all of the different practices in family law, the alternatives. I went to the AFCC Family Law Conference in Ottawa in 2002. We spoke a lot at that about parenting coordination that was just coming to Canada at the time. Dr. Barbara Jo Fiddler was bringing that to Canada. And so from there, I studied with her and it was born.
Okay, and you said you do social work. Are you a registered social worker as well?
I'm a registered social service worker. So I didn't get a degree. I have a diploma from a social service work.
Okay. And so you said you started being involved with parenting coordination back in 2002 with Dr. Fiddler. Have you been doing this kind of work then since 2002?
I have not worked with Barbara Jo. I haven't worked with her. So just want to get that off the table. But yes, I have been doing it since 2002. When it came to Canada, I started educating myself, and she does do a parenting coordination program now. Many years after I started doing it, and I did take the advanced course with her. She is my go-to when I have questions.
Okay, and can you tell me what your role as a parenting coordinator is then? What type of cases do you typically deal with?
We deal with the highest conflict families, people who usually after there's a court order in place or a separation agreement in place, we'll get involved when the parents have difficulty co-parenting. When everything is an argument, everything is creating stress for the kids. So they contract with a parenting coordinator. We generally engage with the family after they get ILA from parents, from their lawyers, and the idea behind parenting coordination is to primarily to teach parents how to negotiate the new relationship that they have, and understand that they do have a new relationship in co-parenting.
Okay, so
they're not spouses.
So does a parenting coordinator, as an example, deal with issues of custody or significant changes in the parenting schedule?
So no. One of the things that people don't understand is that, and they try to get this to happen, is we cannot become engaged or should not become engaged until there is a regular schedule already in place. The reason behind that is we aren't allowed to touch anything that has to do with child support. So if you don't have a regular schedule put in place, and we're negotiating that with parents, the outcome would determine who's paying child support, if it's a 50-50, if there's going to be an offset. So we can't do that.
So that means you wouldn't be assisting in a change in schedule that could impact child support as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
What we do once there's a schedule in place, disclaimer on that, I have become involved just to get the parents to a point where they're able to communicate with each other, to come to an agreement with their lawyers on what that regular schedule should be. That being said, once that is in place, oftentimes what I will do is help them come up with a comprehensive parenting plan for all of the other things, the other areas that we need to cover, which are special occasions and holidays.
Okay, so what would be an example of the kind of case that you've worked on?
Okay, so had so many. I'd say that the most difficult one that I've had to deal with is one mother moved the children from BC to Ontario. Father says that he thought they were going on vacation, and she's conflict on that. But so years later, I've got two boys who have been alienated from dad, and trying to determine whether or not it's alienation on the mother's part, or if the father has alienated them himself. It can be difficult because you have two teenage boys in this case who are so aligned with mom that they were doing everything that they could to protect her, to the point of even lying for her. So to try and navigate that, it takes a level of expertise that you really need to make sure that when you do contract for parenting coordination, that you have somebody who's able to do it, to do that work and to get involved. This particular family, I think one of the most egregious things that happened in this family was a really fun family vacation with dad and the boys, went camping, and the older boy fell off of a mini bike and he had an abrasion on his thigh, and they also went canoeing on the lake. And what that was turned into was both boys believed that the older boy could have lost his leg to an infection, a deep infection, and they would have died instantly had they fallen in the water. And how that came about was mom took them to the doctor, and the doctor looked at the leg. I'm not sure what the conversation was there, but she did ask the doctor, what would happen if the boys fell in minus 46-degree water? Well, had the water been minus 46 degrees, the doctor answered appropriately.
Well, I guess that's a good segue into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. Is I've often said to clients that a good reason to get a parenting coordinator at the beginning is to have the resource to deal with disputes in a far more efficient way than going to court. And when I say that is because sometimes when someone may be starting to demonstrate alienating behavior but hasn't alienated the child, if you have a parenting coordinator, you may be able to stop that kind of activity before it really gets off the ground. Have you been involved in it in that way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. To get a parenting coordinator involved in the initial stages once conflict starts, best case scenario, anytime. One thing, when people start throwing around the word, the phrase parental alienation, I get a little cautious because, anybody who's been divorced and has children understands that we all do things, we say things, we have conversations on the phone where the kids can hear. And then the other parent's going to find out from the kids, well, mom said this, or I heard dad saying that. That's not parental alienation. It's negligent, it's inappropriate, we shouldn't do it, but it happens. But it doesn't come from a place of trying to alienate. When we find parents doing things like this mother did, and saying, had they fallen into minus 46-degree water, well, absolutely, hypothermia would have happened relatively quickly, and yes, they would have died fairly quickly afterward. When I asked the mother what was the prescription for the leg, the doctor suggested maybe some polysporin, which does not speak to what a child with a deep gash, untreated by dad, with an infection, that would have required antibiotics.
And I think my point really is, when that kind of thing happens, as the dad, there's really one of two choices he has to make. One is he basically sucks it up, or two, he has to deal with it. And dealing with it can be done in various ways. One way is trying to educate the children without trying to say their mother's a liar, and try to explain it as a misunderstanding because it clearly wasn't 47 degrees below zero in the water. And the other way is also trying to get into somebody like yourself to say, we need some help here in communication to the children, because we need to communicate. Ideally, you want to communicate a joint message to the children that mom misunderstood the facts, and that the children really weren't in danger. And you need to be doing that, because I tend to think an alienator is the type of person that regularly starts off small and tries to build and build and build and build a foundation. And if you don't stop it right at the beginning, when they're trying to build that foundation, you may find yourself in a lot more problems later on. And that's where one of the places a parenting coordinator can be really helpful, because you have that resource. And go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the problems that I see a lot of is that they do wait far too long to get into a parenting coordinator. And I think that everybody needs to start looking at it in terms of, as soon as we start seeing behaviors that make either lawyer go, or a judge go, or even a parent, to engage with a parenting coordinator early can stop the behavior before it actually starts. One of the other problems I've had, though, is that they engage with a parenting coordinator who isn't actually a parenting coordinator. There's somebody who has said they're a parenting coordinator. They take them down a 1-2 year path, which actually creates a situation. And this particular family actually was in that situation as well. They were engaged with somebody who should not have been doing parenting coordination. And they got to a point where there was no coming back. These boys are of an age where it's done. The relationship is, the only way to repair this relationship is if the judge were to do something, because they are going to trial, if the judge were to do something that I don't even recommend, and that's reverse custody.
Okay, now I'm going to take a segue back to explain to our viewers parenting coordination, because in my mind, the best time to select a parenting coordinator is within the separation agreement. Now, courts don't have the power to make an order for it. And the reason why I like them in separation agreements is really simple. You have two paths for parents. You have an agreement, and that agreement, whether it's a parenting agreement or a separation agreement with a parenting schedule in it, says what the rights and responsibilities of each parent are. But if you don't have a parenting coordinator or a mediator arbitrator to deal with disputes, what you're left with is going back to court. So sometimes the issues when I talk about building the foundation may not be as extreme as moving from one end of the country to the next, but what it may very well be are small incremental steps. And if you phone a lawyer to say, I want you to go to court because my ex is saying all these things to my children, but they're still coming to my home regularly, as lawyers, we're going to say there really isn't anything effectively that we can do. But if you put in the separation agreement the need for a parenting coordinator, there is something we can do, because there's somebody we can get in front of to try and stop this kind of behavior. So it's much better to do it at the beginning when you have that agreement in place than later on, because later on that person who is conducting themselves in that course of conduct is going to realize there's either court or they get away with it. And frequently, they'll just be getting away with it. So really important to deal with it head on. And then I want to ask you some questions about things that I see concerns from clients. Number one concern I hear from clients will be power imbalance. The client who views themselves more as the victim will say, I'm concerned about going to a parenting coordinator if my lawyer isn't present. And I try to explain to them, you don't want to pay for me to go and advocate on your behalf for a lot of these issues. So they're concerned about that. So my question for you is, how do you deal with the issue of power imbalance?
So generally, when we have a high conflict situation, there's going to be a power imbalance. And that's how we end up in these situations to begin with. When I start my process, I do an individual intake for each parent. And that way they get to express their concerns to me, share anything, or ask me any questions they want to outside of the presence of the other person. And I'm always evaluating people. And even when we start meeting together, throughout the process, I'm evaluating their sense of comfort, their sense of sincerity. So the power imbalance doesn't really preclude parenting coordination, but what it does do, putting it into parenting coordination, because what I do is I strip them of all communication. So they can only communicate through email. Even if they're on Family Wizard, I strip them of Family Wizard. They CC me on all emails. And that way I see how they're communicating, who's creating the issues, who's reading tone where there isn't any. Some emails I'll see one come through and I'll immediately respond to that person and say, or the recipient, and say, don't respond to that. I'm going to take issue with it. And I'll do that with the person who's sending, and try to get them to temper what they're saying and understand the trigger words that they're using, and the recipients how to understand that some of these words may be triggers for them, but they normalize the paragraph, they normalize the sentence.
Okay, that's interesting in terms of trying to give people better communication skills, because I know a lot of therapists think it all boils down to a lot, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of the problems are miscommunication between the parties. And that's sometimes, I think, correct. Sometimes the other problem is there is a struggle over power. And the power, I find, can be demonstrated in various ways. One way is simply saying no by the primary caregiver to the secondary caregiver's request for whatever it may be. Another example sometimes is simply non-responsiveness and ignoring the other person's communication and hoping by ignoring the problem goes away. So how do you deal with those kind of issues?
So I don't allow anybody to ignore a communication. If an email comes through and it needs to be addressed, I'll see an email come through and it's a statement that doesn't need to be addressed. I'll see an email come through that's requesting a time change or an action on behalf of the recipient parent. If I don't see a response to that, then I will email that parent and ask them, have you seen this email? You know, you don't automatically assume they're ignoring it. Have you seen this email? If they have, then I'll have a discussion with them about why they haven't responded and what their thoughts are on the email to find out why they haven't responded.
Okay, because those are some common themes that I see as to smaller ways of people trying to build up the I almost call it the program of alienation, while they're trying to program the children, to parents who are saying all sorts of inappropriate things to their children, and then the children are told not to communicate to the other parent any of the inappropriate language or things that they've heard. And you have the other parent who says, well, I know my children are behaving differently. I can see they're colder, they're not communicating with me, they're more withdrawn, but I don't want to pry too much into what they're saying because I don't want to create stress or conflict with them. How do you deal with that kind of problem as a parenting coordinator? Because it's very subtle in terms of what you can see, what you can hear, and do you meet and talk to the children in part of your capacity as a parenting coordinator?
Yeah, absolutely. I meet with the children. Whenever if they're verbal, I will meet with them. If they're able to communicate to me, because one thing, this is one of the reasons that people need to make sure that they contract with a parenting coordinator with the experience and background that you need to be able to navigate through all of the children's developmental stages and stages, and the family dynamics, because it's still a family, it's still a family dynamic. So you have to have the skills to sit with a child and understand that you can't ask a 6-year-old a direct question that the answer would anger or hurt one of their parents. That's just not going to happen. So you do it through play, you do it through general conversation about things that have absolutely nothing to do with what you actually want from them. I had a 4-year-old. I asked her to sit down and we were dusting some stuff on a shelf because you need to find a way to engage. And after we started to dust, she said, my mom hits me a lot. And you have to be able to go with the flow and say, oh, okay. And how about you dust this one now and I'll dust this one. And if you just leave it and let the flow go for the child, she then started to tell me that she hits my sister and it's my sister who's bad, but she hits me at the same time because she doesn't want my sister to feel bad that she's the only one getting hit. So the flow will just come if you allow the child to feel safe and confident and carefree in the moment. And sometimes it's not always that easy. This was extremely easy for me with this child. But I find that if you have the skill, you can get children to tell you what you need to get from them.
Well, I think it's really important what you focused in on there, which is the skill to do it, because I frequently have clients come to me and they say to me, I'm concerned. My ex is saying all these things to the kids, and I'm concerned that the kids aren't going to say it to the social worker or the therapist, and they're just going to say exactly what their mom is teaching them. They're going to parrot it. And I say to them, well, a lot of it may be in how they parrot it even, because you're going to be able to see age appropriate or age inappropriate communication. I mean, the most obvious one I never will forget was early in my career, and the child was probably about 6 years old, came home and said to the mother, how come you stand on street corners? You know, a 6-year-old doesn't come up with mom standing on street corners. And if that's what's being said in front of the 6-year-old, what else is being said?
Right.
And that's the kind of message. Now, there's always a fear, like you said, there's good people who know what they're doing and are good at the job and should be able to elicit out what makes sense as being age appropriate and age inappropriate, versus others that are going to pose the question of, well, what do you want, to the child, and just wait for the child to can parrot what the parent has said and not pick up on that the answers don't make sense. And, like another common theme I have is parents will just simply say, well, I asked the child what they want. The child told me what they want. So that's what they want. And I don't know what is your viewpoint on basically delegating everything to the child and accepting what they say at its face value.
So now we have the voice of the child. So I've always been a proponent of the voice of the child anyway. So, I had a 9-year-old come in and start to tell me, I never bonded with my father. Okay, what does that mean? I never bonded with my father. And when I was 2 and he would come in the door, I would be afraid of him and hide behind the chair. And I said, oh, that must be a difficult memory for you. And it's all about the words that you use, because I knew what I was doing when I said that must be a difficult memory for you, because his response was, oh, I don't remember it. My mom told me. So, you have to have the ability to draw children out to guide them without them realizing that you're guiding them.
Well, I think that's a great illustration of a 9-year-old. When you were saying the story, I was thinking to myself, how did he remember or she remember the story from when they were 2? And you pulled that out wonderfully there, that it wasn't even the child's memory. But how often I hear people say, well, my child has said they don't want to spend, let's say, Sunday nights anymore at dad's house. They'd rather come back to mom's house. And they're telling the mom that. They're like, well, I don't understand why we shouldn't just follow what the child wants. And how do you deal with those kind of statements?
Yeah. So, you have to make it clear to the parents that, children are going to tell you what they think you want to hear. If they're with you, they're going to tell you they like being with you. They don't want to go to dad because they know that you get upset when they say they want to be with dad, or if they talk about things that are pleasant with dad, and vice versa. So you can have one child telling each parent, I often have parents saying that the child is saying, polar opposites when they're in each other's homes. And that's why. So oftentimes also, they will tell both parents that they just want to be with one parent. And we know why they want to be with that one parent, because that parent is very much obstructionist. You have one parent who's very easygoing. I'm always going to be here. Okay, if you want to go to little Johnny's house on Wednesday night, you don't have to come to my house. We'll see each other again, maybe Monday if we can arrange it, or I'll see you again next Wednesday. And then you have the other parent who is what I call a time ownership parent. This is my time. I own it. You can't have a second of it. And the child is very well aware of that, and the animosity and the aggression that parent has toward the other. They're going to align with that parent because it's easier for them. It's the path of least resistance. They know the other parent is always going to be there for them, no matter what. So it's easier to align with the parent that's going to create stress and chaos in their life.
Well, one of the other things I've seen in some cases is when one parent goes to the child or children and says, they love the children more than anyone else in the world, which is an obvious inference that the other parent doesn't have the same love. And I've said to my clients, in my view, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. I don't know what your feeling is on that.
I'm sorry, was there a question there?
Yeah, I was wondering what your feeling is on that kind of behavior, whether that's the kind of thing that you need to jump in and deal with.
Okay. Yeah, so when I'm talking with parents, I mean, this is a hugely educational process. It's not just trying to make decisions for the parents or trying to get them to understand their roles. It's trying to understand the impact of the things that they say around their children and to their children. And some things I tell parents that, don't say that, You know, when you get in daddy's car, make sure you do up your seatbelt, because the child walks away. Does daddy not know? Is daddy not going to keep me safe? Make sure you keep track of your hats and your mittens. It's very cold outside. Okay, well, doesn't my mom know where my hat and my mittens are? So some of these things are planted in kids' heads, in their minds, really to create a situation where I'm going to tell you to put your seatbelt on. I'm going to tell you to wear your hats and mitts because I care more. Think about mom. Think about dad. Think about me.
Well, you know, a perfect example, I know I talked about this on another show that you see more and more of, is one parent who is following the other child around when they're with the other parent on through technology, because they can have Find My iPhone or family sharing, and they like to be able to sit there and look on their phone and watch where the child is going on their phone and communicate to the child that, well, you can't turn off the location setting on your phone because it's dangerous. And, you know, mommy or daddy has to be able to follow where you're going. And I've said to clients, to me, that's really problematic because, you know, you don't want somebody else being able to watch you in real time, which is far different than one parent saying, so what did you do when you were at mommy's, or what did you do when you were at daddy's? In contrast with, I'm seeing where you're going right now. So I don't know if you're seeing more and more of that in your practice.
Yeah, unfortunately, technology, while it's a wonderful thing for parenting coordination because we do have such instant communication when there is an issue. On the other hand, this is one of the problems. The location setting. I've got a parent who has to constantly check the phone, turn off the settings every time the child comes home. It gets turned off. The other issue with the technology, though, is monitoring the child's day just by constantly texting the child or FaceTiming the child or whatever it is they're doing on the phone. And it really interferes in the relationship and the enjoyment of the time that child has with the parent that they're with at that time. Because I could be, and I explained to my parents, what I like them to do is, if you want to communicate with the other child, text the parent first and find out if it's convenient. Because one of two things can be happening. One, that parent can be doing something with the child with the parent, doing something really fun. But they haven't seen the other parent in 2 days. So now you text that child or FaceTime, and the child is so distracted from what they're doing with the parent they're with, you can't get back to that. And now they're all about the parent that they're communicating with on the device because I haven't seen you in a couple of days. And the other issue is if a child is being punished and you text through or FaceTime, it's very difficult for a parent when you're punishing, say, an 8-year-old. And it's been interfered with by communication from the other parent. Now, how do I get back to that? Because now the child's, you know, dad's this or mom's that, or this is unreasonable and this is happening and I want to come home, come and get me, because they're being punished.
Well, I think that all makes a lot of sense. And that's where technology is a problem. I think you have a great idea in saying you have to text the other parent. I can also see sometimes that can be problematic because some parents will always say it's not a good time. I know another alternative sometimes is just limiting the communication. You limit it to one communication a day. I know one psychologist, he says in his mind, one communication a day is more than enough to touch base, and there shouldn't be a constant stream of text messages or FaceTime or phone calls between parent and child for all the reasons you just said about interrupting the parenting time and the flow of the parenting time.
Yep. And I 100% agree. And I try to get all of my clients to agree that they'll have one communication at the end of the day in the evening that's not disruptive to dinner or disruptive to bedtime. But there are times when I'll have two parents who both want to be able to communicate with the other with the child when they're with the other parent, if need be, or if something comes up. In those cases, that's when I implement having you text the other parent first. The issue, and before they even bring it up, I raise the issue of, if you don't get a response, then it's not a good time. If the response is no, then it's not a good time. And that could be reflective of the relationship that you and the other parent have at that time. Or it could just be, it's not a good time right now. And it has to be okay. So if you don't get a response, that has to be okay. And if you do get a response and it's a no, that has to be okay.
Well, I think that's really good advice that you're giving our viewers. I want to say I really enjoyed the discussion that we had. I think there's some really useful information for parents who either are divorced or are going through the process. Our next Ask Andrew show is on March 21st, 2019 at 1 p.m. If you have any requests or ideas on future shows, please email them to us at info at feldsteinfamilylaw.com. And thank you for watching.